Most people say they don't believe in giants. Yet millions of people click on videos about giant skeletons. They scroll through blurry photos. They argue in comment sections. They return again and again. So here is the real question. Why do so many people want giants to be real? Not, are giants real? Silence. Before any image appears, before any evidence is shown, there is silence. Because the idea of giants does not begin with bones. It begins with a feeling that something about the past was bigger. Not just taller, not just stronger, but more meaningful. Long before people argue about photographs or measurements, they experience that feeling first. And that is where this story truly begins. For decades, the same debate has repeated itself. Were giants real? Did giant humans once walk the earth? Are these skeletons authentic or fake? The internet is filled with answers. Experts say no. Believers say yes. Debunkers provide measurements. Supporters provide old newspapers. And yet, despite all of this, the debate never ends. Which leads to a much more important realization. If a question survives even after countless answers, then perhaps we are asking the wrong question. Because if this was only about anatomy, the conversation would have ended long ago. But it hasn't. So today, instead of asking whether giants existed, we will ask something far more revealing. Why do so many people want them to exist? We live in the most technologically advanced age in human history. We can see the Earth from space. We can measure atoms. We can store entire libraries inside a pocket-sized device. And yet, despite this unprecedented scale, many people feel smaller than ever. Modern life compresses human existence. Your work becomes a role. Your thoughts become data. Your time becomes productivity. Even your attention is measured, sold, and optimized. In such a world, the individual feels replaceable, interchangeable, small. This emotional condition matters more than most people realize. Because when humans feel small, they begin to search for stories where humanity was once greater. And giants represent exactly that. Giants are not just tall beings in ancient stories. They are a counterweight to modern insignificance. They symbolize a time when humans were closer to gods. Nature was overwhelming. History felt alive and dangerous. In those stories, humans were not passive observers of systems. They were actors within a cosmic drama. Giants existed at the edges of that drama. They were threats, teachers, builders, destroyers. They made the world feel large enough to matter. One of the most fascinating facts about giants is not whether they existed physically. It is that they exist culturally everywhere. From the Nephilim of the Bible, to the Jotnar of Norse mythology, to the Titans of Greece, to the giants of Native American oral traditions. Different continents, different timelines, different belief systems. Yet the pattern is remarkably consistent. Giants always belong to the past. Giants are always associated with a previous age. Giants are almost always destroyed, defeated, or erased. This consistency suggests something profound. Giants are not historical creatures. They are psychological markers. They represent the boundary between an old world and the present one. Modern history presents itself as progress. We are told that we are smarter than our ancestors. We are more advanced. We understand the world better than ever before. But emotionally, this narrative often fails. Because progress does not automatically create meaning. Ancient civilizations built structures that still inspire awe. Massive stone temples, megalithic platforms, architecture that feels excessive, even irrational. When modern explanations feel dry or mechanical, people instinctively search for alternative narratives. Giants enter the story not as proof, but as purpose. They give these structures a sense of intention beyond logistics. Instead of "this was efficient," the story becomes "this was built by beings who were different from us." Scale has always shaped human imagination. Children instinctively exaggerate size when describing importance. Big heroes, big monsters, big battles. Ancient storytellers understood this. When they wanted to describe an age of power, they didn't use statistics. They used giants, because size communicates significance faster than logic ever could. A giant is not impressive because of height alone. A giant is impressive because it makes the human perspective feel fragile. And fragility is the foundation of meaning. There is a quiet discomfort in a world where everything is explained, not because explanations are wrong, but because they leave no room for wonder. When every mystery becomes a diagram, something emotional disappears. Giants resist that process. They remain emotionally large even when intellectually dismissed. You can explain away a skeleton, but you cannot easily explain away the feeling that something ancient was greater than us. It is easy to mock belief in giants, but mockery misses the emotional core. Most people defending giants are not defending bones. They are defending a sense of lost depth in history, a feeling that the past mattered more than the present, a belief that humanity once stood closer to something profound. When someone says they don't want us to know about giants, what they often mean is, they don't want us to believe we were once important. Modern thinking reduces everything. Love becomes chemistry. Consciousness becomes neurons. History becomes timelines. Giants resist reduction. They refuse to be small ideas. And that resistance is attractive. Because deep down, many people do not want to live in a world where everything meaningful can be reduced to mechanics. Photographs of giant skeletons spread not because they are convincing. They spread because they feel right. They match an internal expectation. They visually express something people already believe emotionally. That history is incomplete. That something was removed. That the past was more than textbooks suggest. The image becomes a symbol, not evidence. Here is the crucial insight of this episode. Belief in giants does not begin with misinformation. It begins with dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction with modern identity, modern history, modern scale of meaning. Giants fill a vacuum left by a world that feels optimized but empty. If we continue to treat giants as a question of physical proof, we will fail to understand why the belief persists. But if we treat giants as a mirror, something changes. They stop being a mystery of the past. They become a diagnosis of the present. And that realization opens a much deeper investigation. Giants may never be proven real in bone or blood, but they are undeniably real in the human mind. And as long as modern life continues to make people feel small, replaceable, and disconnected, the giants will keep returning. Not because they walked the earth, but because they walk inside us. At some point, without ceremony and without announcement, history began to shrink. Not physically, not in books, but in meaning. The past did not disappear. It was compressed. What was once vast became manageable. What was once complex became linear. What was once mysterious became instructional. And most people never noticed when it happened. For most of human existence, history was not a discipline. It was a story. It lived in oral traditions, myth, family lineages, sacred narratives, monumental architecture. History was not something you studied. It was something you inhabited. The past was alive, dangerous, and morally charged. It was filled with heroes larger than life, disasters beyond comprehension, and ages that felt fundamentally different from the present. This kind of history did not shrink the human spirit. It expanded it. The turning point came surprisingly late. Only a few centuries ago, history was reorganized into something new. A system. Dates. Periods. Categories. Accepted narratives. This transformation did not happen because humans suddenly discovered truth. It happened because large societies needed stability. And stability requires predictability. Empires do not fear the future. They fear the past. Because a vast past reminds people that civilizations rise and fall. Power is temporary. Dominance is not destiny. An unbounded past creates perspective, and perspective weakens authority. So history was standardized, not erased, not falsified, but simplified. One of the most powerful tools ever applied to history was linear time. Before linear time dominated thinking, many cultures believed in cycles, ages, repeating worlds, declines followed by renewals. In such systems, humanity did not progress endlessly. It fluctuated, sometimes upward, sometimes downward, sometimes catastrophically. Linear time changed that. It presented history as a straight line. Primitive, developed, modern, advanced. Once this model was accepted, everything ancient automatically became smaller, less advanced, less capable, less meaningful. And giants no longer fit. Giants are incompatible with linear progress. Because if giants existed in the past, then size does not equal progress. Complexity does not equal technology. Advancement is not guaranteed. Giants suggest a past that was different, not inferior. That idea is dangerous to a system built on progress. As universities expanded and nation-states formed, history became professionalized. This brought many benefits: standards, methodology, verification, peer review. But it also introduced constraints. Only what could be categorized, archived, and footnoted survived. What could not be measured was sidelined. Symbolic history became myth. Oral tradition became folklore. Sacred narratives became belief systems. And belief systems were separated from reality. This separation had unintended consequences. When myth is stripped of truth value, it loses emotional authority. And when emotional authority disappears, history becomes distant, dry, flat, harmless. The past stops challenging the present. It becomes entertainment or education, not confrontation. Giants once confronted humanity with scale. Now they are reduced to bedtime stories. But there was a problem. Some things refused to become small. Massive stone platforms, cyclopean walls, monuments that seemed excessive for their supposed purpose. These structures resisted simple explanations. So instead of questioning the narrative adapted. Labor was multiplied. Timelines were stretched. Human effort was exaggerated. Anything was acceptable, as long as it didn't suggest a fundamentally different past. History education gradually removed ambiguity, not because ambiguity was solved, but because ambiguity is difficult to teach. A classroom needs answers. A curriculum needs conclusions. An exam needs certainty. Giants live in ambiguity, so they were pushed out. In the modern world, information is abundant, but meaning is scarce. People do not turn to giants because they reject science. They turn to giants because official history feels emotionally incomplete. Too clean. Too confident. Too small. When the internet arrived, something unexpected happened. For the first time, people could explore the past outside institutional filters. Old maps resurfaced. Newspaper clippings reappeared. Forgotten theories returned. Not all of it was accurate. But accuracy was not the main appeal. Scale was. The Internet reopened the idea that history might be larger than we were taught. And giants rushed back in. Debunking giant skeletons often misses the point. Because people are not defending the photos. They are defending the possibility that history was reduced. Complexity was lost. Meaning was edited out. You cannot debunk a feeling with measurements. Belief in giants functions as a protest against oversimplification, intellectual sterilization, a past stripped of awe. It says, history was not just a timeline. It was an experience. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Modern institutions and alternative theorists actually agree on something. They both assume the past must be controlled. One controls it through standardization. The other controls it through spectacle. But both reduce complexity in different ways. True understanding lies somewhere else. Instead of asking, were giants real? A better question emerges. What kind of past would create stories of giants? This shifts the focus from proof to context, from bones to meaning. History did not become smaller because it was false. It became smaller because it needed to be manageable. And giants were simply too large to fit. In the next part, we will explore what happens when imagery replaces evidence, and how photographs became the new mythology of the modern age. There was a time when images were secondary. They illustrated ideas. They supported stories. They followed meaning. That time is over. Today, images come first. Meaning follows, if it follows at all. And this shift fundamentally changed how people interpret the past. From the moment photography was invented, it was treated as truth. Not because it was accurate, but because it felt objective. A photograph seemed to say, this existed. This happened. This was real. Unlike paintings or oral stories, photographs appeared mechanical, impersonal, unemotional, unbiased. That illusion would shape centuries of belief. The human brain evolved long before writing. Visual recognition predates language. When we see an image, the brain does not ask, is this accurate? It asks, is this familiar? And familiarity creates trust. This is why a single image can overpower hours of explanation. In modern culture, visual proof carries more authority than logic. A diagram can defeat an argument. A photo can silence skepticism. A video can bypass critical thinking entirely. This is not accidental. Visual information activates emotional centers faster than rational ones. Once emotion is triggered, reasoning becomes secondary. Most viral giant skeleton images share common traits. Dramatic scale contrast. A lone human figure nearby. Earth-toned excavation settings. Archaeological aesthetics. These elements are carefully chosen. They do not prove anything. They signal authenticity. The image feels archaeological, even when it is not. One of the most important questions is rarely asked. Where did this photo come from? Most viral images lack source attribution, original publication, verifiable excavation records, academic documentation. But the absence of context does not weaken belief. It strengthens it, because mystery fills the gap. Clear explanations feel finished. Mystery feels alive. When an image lacks context, viewers project meaning onto it. They become participants, not observers. This psychological engagement deepens belief. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, fabricated discoveries were common. Newspapers exaggerated findings. Photographs were staged. Scale was manipulated. These hoaxes were not always malicious. They were entertainment. But they established a visual language that persists today. With the rise of digital tools, image creation became effortless. What once required studios and darkrooms now takes minutes. But the brain reacts the same way. It does not evolve at the speed of technology. A manipulated image triggers the same emotional response as a real one. Debunkers often focus on technical flaws, shadow inconsistencies, pixel artifacts, proportional errors. But belief does not operate at that level. People are not convinced by images because they look perfect. They are convinced because the image confirms a feeling they already have. Ancient myths used narrative. Modern myths use imagery. A single photo replaces an entire legend. And just like myths, these images are repeated, are exaggerated, are adapted over time. Truth becomes irrelevant. Impact becomes everything. Social platforms reward shock, simplicity, emotional reaction. Nuance does not spread. Ambiguity does not trend. A complex explanation loses to a striking image every time. Giants thrive in this environment. Many people share giant skeleton images even when unsure. Why? Because sharing is not about belief. It is about participation. Sharing says, "Look at this. Question this. Feel this." The image becomes a conversation starter, not a claim. Images with no source are often framed as censored. Why isn't this in textbooks? They don't want you to see this. This framing creates a powerful psychological effect. The viewer feels special. The belief feels rebellious. Skepticism feels like obedience. This dynamic protects the image from critique. At a certain point, questioning the image feels personal, because the image is no longer just content. It is identity. Believing in giants becomes a statement about distrust of authority, intellectual independence, resistance to official narratives. Debunking the image feels like an attack on selfhood. The real issue is not fake images. It is replaced thinking. When images dominate understanding, curiosity narrows. Context disappears. Critical reasoning weakens. The image becomes the conclusion, not the beginning. Giants persist not because of evidence, but because images allow belief without commitment. You do not need to build a theory. You do not need to understand history. You only need to see. Images give certainty, and certainty is comforting. But certainty without understanding is fragile. It collapses under scrutiny, which is why belief in giants swings between obsession and disappointment. Humanity moved from story, meaning, image, to image, reaction, belief. This reversal changes everything. Giants did not return because archaeology failed. They returned because images replaced understanding. And as long as images continue to outrun thought, the giants will never disappear. In the next part, we will explore what happens when skepticism itself becomes a belief system, and why both believers and debunkers often miss the same truth. Skepticism was once a tool. It existed to slow belief, to test claims, to protect understanding from deception. But at some point, skepticism changed. Quietly, gradually, almost imperceptibly. It stopped being a method and became an identity. True skepticism asks, what evidence supports this? What assumptions are being made? What alternative explanations exist? Modern skepticism often skips these steps. Instead, it begins with a conclusion. That can't be true. No investigation. No curiosity. No engagement. Just dismissal. This is not skepticism. It is reflex. Belief carries risk. To believe is to be vulnerable, to risk being wrong, to expose oneself to ridicule. Skepticism feels safer. It signals intelligence, distance, control. To say, "I don't believe that," requires less effort than understanding why someone else might. Disbelief is often rewarded socially. It aligns with authority, with education, with intellectual respectability. Mockery replaces inquiry. Certainty replaces curiosity. And slowly, skepticism becomes performative. This is the uncomfortable truth. Extreme believers and extreme skeptics behave the same way. Both select evidence selectively, ignore inconvenient data, protect identity over understanding, react emotionally to contradiction. They are not opposites. They are reflections. Giants sit at the perfect intersection. They are emotionally powerful, historically ambiguous, visually provocative, which makes them ideal for identity formation. Believers say, "I see what others ignore." Skeptics say, "I am not fooled like others." Both gain status. Neither gains understanding. Modern skepticism often confuses dismissal with intelligence. But rejecting a claim without analysis is not rational. It is efficient. Efficiency feels smart. But it is not the same as insight. Debunking culture thrives on exposure, finding flaws, pointing errors, highlighting mistakes. But it rarely builds understanding. It ends conversations instead of deepening them. And in doing so, it mirrors the same reductionism it criticizes. Original skepticism was humble. It acknowledged uncertainty. It welcomed complexity. It accepted limits. Modern skepticism often pretends certainty. It claims to know what cannot be true, even when the evidence is incomplete. This is belief disguised as doubt. When skeptics dismiss without explanation, they lose credibility, not because they are wrong, but because they fail to engage emotionally. People do not change beliefs through correction. They change beliefs through understanding. The real conflict is not about giants. It is about authority. Who gets to define reality? Who decides what questions are acceptable? Who controls the narrative of the past? Giants simply expose this tension. Trust in institutions has weakened, not without reason. History has been wrong before. Experts have revised conclusions. Narratives have shifted. This does not mean everything is false, but it does mean blind trust is gone. Skepticism fills the gap, sometimes wisely, sometimes blindly. At its worst, skepticism becomes rigid. Nothing new is allowed. Nothing ambiguous is tolerated. Nothing unexplained is explored. This closes the door to discovery. Many breakthroughs began as anomalies. Dismissal would have prevented them. Between blind belief and rigid skepticism lies a neglected space. Critical curiosity. A space where questions are asked without allegiance. Where doubt exists without contempt. Where belief is provisional, not absolute. This space is uncomfortable, which is why few stay there. Giants persist because neither side resolves the tension. Believers cling. Skeptics reject. Neither listens. The topic survives because it remains unresolved emotionally, not intellectually. Modern culture values conclusions more than process, answers more than questions, positions more than exploration. Giants disrupt that. They force people to choose a side, and choice feels powerful. Here is the turning point. The question is not, "Are giants real?" It is, "What does our reaction to giants reveal about how we think?" And the answer is uncomfortable. We prefer certainty to understanding, even when certainty is false. When skepticism becomes faith, curiosity dies, dialogue collapses, complexity disappears, history becomes smaller again, just in a different way. Skepticism was meant to open minds, not close them. Belief was meant to inspire wonder, not blind loyalty. Giants exist in the space where both failed. And until that space is reclaimed, the debate will continue endlessly, loud, polarized, and empty. In the next part, we will step away from belief and disbelief entirely, and examine what the evidence actually allows us to say, without emotion, without allegiance, and without spectacle. To understand what the evidence allows, we must first do something difficult. We must step away from both belief and disbelief. Not temporarily, completely, because both positions arrive with conclusions already attached. Evidence does not begin with conclusions. It begins with limits. Evidence is not proof. This distinction is critical. Evidence is information that constrains possibilities. Proof is a conclusion that eliminates alternatives. Most historical questions never reach proof. They remain within probability. This is not a failure of science. It is the nature of the past. Ancient history is incomplete by definition. Time destroys organic material, context, records, associations. What survives is random, not representative, not balanced, not fair. Absence of evidence is expected. Presence of evidence is exceptional. This reality must frame every discussion. Let us be precise. We do not have verified giant human skeletons in academic repositories, peer-reviewed anatomical confirmation of extreme human size beyond known variation, continuous cultural archaeological chains supporting literal giants. This matters, but it does not end the discussion. We do have cross-cultural narratives of oversized beings, architectural scale that feels excessive, anatomical anomalies within known species, misinterpretations amplified by modern media, a persistent psychological pattern across societies. These are not proof, but they are data, and data demands interpretation. Modern discourse collapses complexity into binaries, real or fake, true or false, science or myth. History does not operate this way. Something can be symbolically true, psychologically real, physically exaggerated, historically distorted. At the same time, giants may exist in this layered space. Biology sets constraints: bone density, cardiovascular limits, structural stress. These limits do not forbid large humans entirely. They constrain extremes. A 4-meter-tall human is unlikely. A slightly larger than modern human is plausible. Outliers exist in every population. Biology allows variation. It does not allow fantasy. This boundary matters. The absence of giant skeletons does not automatically disprove all giant narratives, because burial practices vary. Cultural treatment of bodies differs. Symbolic exaggeration distorts memory. Archaeological focus is uneven, but absence does limit claims. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary support. Large architecture does not require large bodies. This must be stated clearly. Human societies have always leveraged organization, labor coordination, mechanical advantage, time. Monuments feel impossible only when modern humans project modern impatience onto ancient worlds. Time was abundant. Labor was communal. Purpose was collective. Scale alone proves nothing. Alternative theories often collapse at one point. They treat anomalies as conclusions instead of questions. An anomaly is an invitation to investigate, not permission to declare. When speculation outruns evidence, credibility collapses. Scientific honesty includes uncertainty. We do not know is not weakness. It is discipline. Most viral giant claims reject uncertainty. They demand certainty immediately. This emotional urgency undermines legitimacy. Mainstream science is cautious, sometimes too cautious, not because it hides truth, but because it operates under institutional pressure, funding, reputation, peer consensus. These pressures discourage speculative exploration. This creates blind spots. But blind spots are not conspiracies. They are structural. This distinction is crucial. A limit is an honest boundary. A lie is intentional deception. Most historical gaps are limits, not lies. Conflating the two destroys meaningful inquiry. Here is what evidence reasonably allows. Literal giants as depicted in viral images are not supported. Human size variation existed and still exists. Symbolic exaggeration shaped ancient storytelling. Architecture reflects social organization, not anatomy. Psychological needs shape historical interpretation. The past was not smaller, but it was different. This may feel unsatisfying, because it resists spectacle. But it is solid ground. People want answers. Clear ones. Bold ones. Definitive ones. But reality often offers frameworks, not conclusions. Understanding demands patience. Belief demands speed. Giants may not be a species. They may be a composite, a fusion of memory, symbol, scale, loss, longing. They persist because they express something real, even if they are not physically literal. The greatest error in this debate is the demand for final answers. History is not finished. Interpretation evolves. New evidence emerges. Finality belongs to ideology, not inquiry. When we release the need for giants to be real or fake, something opens. We can explore why myths emerge, how societies remember, what architecture communicates, how humans process loss and scale. These questions are richer than skeletons. The strongest position is not belief or disbelief. It is humility, the willingness to say, I don't know yet, but I'm willing to think carefully. That stance is rare, which is why it matters. The evidence does not give us giants, and it does not give us dismissal either. It gives us boundaries. Within those boundaries lies a deeper understanding, not of the past alone, but of ourselves. In the final part, we will step back and ask the most important question of all. What does this entire debate reveal about how modern humans relate to history, meaning, and truth? After all the analysis, the arguments, the images, the skepticism, and the evidence, the question remains. Not because it is unanswered, but because it is unexhausted. Giants never disappear from human culture, not because they are real in bone and flesh, but because they serve a function that facts alone cannot replace. Ancient societies created giants to explain natural forces, moral boundaries, the rise and fall of civilizations. Modern societies create giants for different reasons: to challenge authority, to resist simplification, to re-enchant a world that feels over-explained. The form changes. The need does not. Giants are not about height. They are about scale. They ask a question modern life rarely answers. Was the past greater than the present? Not technologically, but existentially. Did people once feel closer to purpose, danger, and consequence? Giants emerge wherever that question lingers. When giants are dismissed without replacement, something is lost. not truth, but depth. A purely procedural past feels sterile, predictable, emotionless. Humans do not connect to timelines. They connect to narratives. And giants are narrative anchors. We live in an age of contradiction. Everything is vast. Data, population, infrastructure. Yet individual meaning feels reduced. This imbalance creates psychological tension. Giants correct it symbolically. They reintroduce disproportion. They make humans feel small in a meaningful way, not a disposable one. It is tempting to blame belief in giants on ignorance. That is a mistake. Many who engage deeply with these ideas are intelligent, reflective, and critical. They are not seeking fantasy. They are seeking significance. Myths are not failed science. They are successful meaning. When myths are forced into literal frameworks, they collapse. When dismissed entirely, they resurface in distorted forms. Understanding lies in translation, not rejection. Giants may represent societies that collapsed suddenly, builders whose works outlived their names, generations that felt overwhelmed by their world. Memory exaggerates what matters. Size becomes metaphor, because resolution would require agreement on something deeper. What history is for. If history is only to catalog facts, giants vanish. If history is to help humans understand themselves, giants remain indispensable. This series was never meant to convince. It was meant to recalibrate, to move the viewer from belief versus disbelief to understanding versus reduction. If you still wonder about giants after this episode, that is not failure. That is engagement. Truth is not always a destination. Sometimes it is a discipline, a way of approaching questions with humility, patience, and restraint. Giants teach us that restraint is harder than belief, and harder than dismissal. In another decade, another platform, another generation, new images will circulate. Old debates will resurface. The same emotional patterns will repeat, because the conditions that create giants persist. Disconnection, scale imbalance, loss of narrative depth. We can continue the cycle. Belief, debunk, resentment, re-emergence. Or we can choose something rarer. Understanding without spectacle. Curiosity without allegiance. History without reduction. Giants were never asking us to believe in them. They were asking us to notice something missing. Not in the past, but in the present. The giants will never disappear. Not because they walked the earth, but because they walk through every age that feels smaller than it should. And until we learn how to live with mystery without turning it into belief or erasing it with certainty, the giants will remain. Silent, persistent, waiting.